Welcome to Monday Night Live. Uh, Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If you can, do me a favor and hit the like button. That way I'll be able to tell that you can hear. If you don't hear me, don't hit the like button. Oh, wait a minute. I don't think that works. But anyway, if you can hear me, do me a favor, smash on the like button. And I got the chat box open up on the system. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box. If you're watching on the replay, because I know a lot of people watch the replay of this, if you'll put the comments in either in Facebook or in YouTube where you're watching it, I'll come back and try to answer them. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. I'd really like everybody to let me know in the comments down below when you think cruising is going to start again. And maybe, hi Pam, and maybe even a better question is when do you think you'll cruise again? I see so many discussions on the subject. I'd kind of like to get a feel for what my audience is thinking about. We're going to talk about cruise news tonight, and there is a ton of things that are happening. And some of them, if you start to read between the lines, you get a better sense, really, of what the cruise lines think compared to with what, if you look at what they're actually publishing in their schedules and when they say they're going to start sailing. To start with, let me pop up. This one I thought was kind of interesting. Norwegian Cruise Lines, this was just today. In fact, does it have a time on it? No, it doesn't have a time. But it was fairly late today. This news item popped up. And what's going to happen is Norwegian Cruise Lines is trying to sell off part of the company. Carnival did that a while back. They sold an 8% stake. This article doesn't give you the information to let you know what NCL is totally selling, but the goal of it is obviously to raise cash. In last week on a video, there was a point made that that Carnival had raised enough cash that they could go through the end of the year without selling a single cabin and still be okay financially. Royal Caribbean last week hit the banks up pretty hard for some money. They raised about $3 billion to tide them over. Norwegian's kind of lagging, so they need to get some money raised. Let's go to another piece of news. And it's kind of interesting. Let me back up. At the end of last week, what happened, put me back where I can see me. At the end of last week, what happened was the CDC put a stop cruise order, or basically a stop travel order out that was going to last for 100 days, and it really primarily affected the cruise lines. And that pushed the start of cruise season into kind of like mid-July timeframe. And it's very interesting that when on Monday, Carnival came out and announced that they were shutting down. Hi, Joyce. Some of the cruise lines announced that they were going to start sailing in June. NCL moved theirs just a little ways into May. But the interesting thing in all of that is, like I said, the stop cruise order actually goes into July. And nobody said that, hey, we're not going to sail until we get into July. And again, I mentioned this before, but part of the reason is they're trying to keep cash flowing in so that they can continue to sit on the reserves of cash they're building up. They have to have cash when there's no money coming in to pay the bills. Associated with that, some new news or some more news. Let me pop, I'm going to go back to the screen here. And so we'll start with this one right here. The Holland America Line Group. And when I say Holland America Line Group, that includes Seaborne, it includes Holland America, it includes Princess. They're sending 8 ships to carry crew members back to various points around the world. So I've got the list here, and I'll have a link down below. I'm not going to read all this to you, but basically 4 Princess ships, 3 of the Holland America ships, and 1 of the Seaborne ships are all ferrying crew members back to where they're from around the world. Now, for those Princess and Holland America ships that are leaving the east coast of the U.S. and headed to the Philippines, that's about a 28 or 29 day trip, and that's if they're steaming at pretty close to full speed. So 28 days over, 28 days back, that pushes it out about, I see that, Pam. I was on that same cruise on the Sun. But anyway, so it pushes the start of cruising out 60 days from now, which is very late in September. But that would be true only if those ships came back with a full staff of fresh crew members. But they're not. They're just taking the crew members home. So when those ships get back, they'll be basically minimum staffed, as will most of the ships in the fleet. Now, I can't find specific details on what ships are going to have how much staff, but they made the point in this article, and we'll look at one on Carnival in just a second, that what they were doing was they were collecting the cruise members off all the ships and putting them on a ship going to their home country, and they were shipping them off. They're going to go back home, and we're going to come into there's some interesting problems with that part of it as well. But we'll start with that. So we're going to have a lot of ships around with minimal crew. They'll have engineering staff and and officers and safety crew on board, and a small staff to take care of feeding and cleaning for those folks that are on board. But other than that, those ships are empty. So when they decide to start cruising, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to get the crew members on flights from the Philippines or Indonesia or China, wherever it is, and try to bring them back to the U.S. That means that the international airline travel has got to be open and fairly unrestricted. That means that the destinations they're coming from have to have COVID under control to the point that the U.S. will let them fly in. So all of those things speak to the fact that the cruise lines probably are expecting this to go on much longer than they're telling us. And again, I don't blame them for not putting all their cards on the table. They have to protect two things. They have to protect cash flow. The other thing is they're trying to manage the workload on their staff. Imagine what had happened if let's say they canceled 6 months worth of cruises back in April when things started looking bad. How many reservations would that be, and how long would it take their staff to work through it? Plus, how many irate phone calls would they have to deal with every day? So by phasing through the cancellations every 30 days or so at a time, it manages the workload and it reduces the cash outlay. A lot of people are canceling cruises on their own rather than waiting on the cruise line. If you cancel on your own, all you get is future cruise credit, which costs the cruise line no cash. Again, it's all about preserving cash. If you wait till they cancel, then you can get your cash back. So they want to try to encourage you to cancel on your own. They want to do everything they can to minimize the amount of cash they give back. Let's go back over a couple of things I'll pop up here we'll talk about just real briefly. Down here in the bottom, you'll notice it said that instead of heroes welcome, the Filipinos are getting discriminated against when they go home because everybody thinks they're probably sick. A lot of rumors and innuendo there, which is a problem. Here's another problem. This is the Sun Princess, and they're not letting her crew disembark when they got to Manila. They're basically quarantining them on the ship for at least another 14 days to make sure that nobody's sick. Even though when they got there, they didn't have any reported cases, any indication of COVID on the ship. They're holding the ship there and basically using it as a floating hotel for the crew till they're ready to let them travel home. All of this, again, points to the fact that if they're sending more ships over there and they face the potential of having them to sit there for 2 weeks, now we add that to, let's say, 50 days or 60 days of travel time and another 14. Now we're at 74 days that ship's going to be tied up. All of that points to the fact that the cruise lines believe that they're not going to start sailing in June. I'm not saying they won't, but if it will, it'll have to be just a very few ships. Like I said, they may be keeping some fully staffed, but they're trying to minimize peril. Plus, a lot of these people that are on board, their contracts are running out. And what they've been doing is if their contract runs out, they can't work on board, so they're not getting paid. But the ship is providing, food and, lodging and all the things they need to survive. But again, these people, their families depend on them working. So it's just a really difficult situation. On the Carnival Magic, they're going to Europe to take Eastern European cruisers, or excuse me, Eastern European crew members home. So they're off to, they were going to set sail, it said, on April 22nd. That's a shorter journey, so they would be ready sooner. But again, they've got to have a full complement of crew on board. And then Carnival's also deploying some other ships, so you can see them there. But basically, Panorama, Glory, Breeze, and Magic and Fantasy are all going to be deployed to start taking crew members home. And all of this points to the fact that they're not believing they're going to start sailing in 30 or 45 days. I think it points to, they think that they won't sail actually probably into the fall, is would be my best guess. Just like I said, I'm just kind of reading between the lines, looking at what they're doing. I mean, it's going to cost a lot of money to send a ship, say from Miami to Manila. That's a long ways to send a ship over and back. You know, they're doing that for a reason. So let me go back. So other news, and this actually applies to all travel, but it's kind of going to have a big impact. So yeah, let me go here. Just had to pick the right one. So Spain, let's go up here to the top. Spain said they're going to open up their economy in 2 stages. The second stage, which includes cruising and travel, is probably not going to happen until Christmas. So basically, we've got 9 more months or 8 more months of Spain being locked down. That's better than Italy. It says, it talks about football stadiums or nightclubs until March of 2021. But it's also at the bottom here. Let me find it. In phase 3, it says beyond March 31st, the last step will be to reopen the borders and allow travel. So that puts Italy shut down until into let's say at least the 1st of April of next year. Spain shut down until Christmas. What that's going to do is devastate the Mediterranean cruise season. Because if you can't go to Spain, you can't go to Italy, the odds are really good that you're not going to be able to go on much of a cruise. The only thing that I couldn't get a confirmation on in my research today was I don't know what the status is in Greece. So it's possible you might be able to go to Greece on a cruise and be able to and do a cruise there. And there are some ships that focus on that market and may go like to Turkey and some other places. Crystal Cruise Lines is one of them, or not Crystal, Celestial. So it is a possibility that there may be some limited Mediterranean, but the major Mediterranean ports and the ones that are normally viewed as a Mediterranean cruise are pretty much, looks like, shut down for the year. And by the time you get into October, typically that season starts to wind way down. Alaska, Princess, early part of this week, pulled most of their ships out of that market. They're hoping to have 2 ships in the Alaskan market after July, and that's assuming everything opens back up. Carnival is going to change some of their itineraries. Holland America pulled most of their ships out of the Alaska market, and they're planning on running some short sailings out of Seattle again, if Seattle opens, if Canada opens, and if cruising opens. But it's not going to be much of an Alaskan season, probably very minimal Mediterranean season. Northern Europe, it's too hard to tell right now, whether they might be able to do some Baltic capital cruises. But again, before they can do that, you've got to be able to travel. You've got to be able to fly to get to your destination, and the ports all have to be open. So it looks like it's not going to be much of a cruise season if we do get one. I think what we're most likely to get, based on the news I'm seeing right now, is we're probably going to get some Caribbean season hopefully in the mid to late fall, is going to start to open up in the Caribbean. We'll probably see limited cruising, shorter cruises, maybe some that are just like sea days and go to a private island, depending on how everything else goes. One thing that the chairman of Carnival said in his video interview, and I'm trying to think, I think it was Monday, he made the statement that once social distancing is no longer necessary, then we can start to look at cruising. And there's some real questions, both sides of the fence, and I'm not going to take a side one way or the other, but there's real question about exactly when we can stop socially distancing. And, you think about how are you going to get on a cruise ship and maintain what we consider 6 feet of separation between you and every other passenger on the ship. It's going to make cruising so challenging that I can't see them trying to open up under those conditions. They may start, when they do start, they may really reduce capacity, which would help people spread out better. One of the cruise lines has announced that they're going to only limit shows to half, like basically every other seat in the theaters are going to be empty. And, they're trying to do something. They're trying to put in protocols in place now to do that. But I'm still a long ways from convinced that until we get a handle on coronavirus, that we're going to be in a situation where cruising builds up much steam. There are some of us that are diehard cruisers, and I'm one. My wife is not so much one, where I would probably go get on a ship right now today if I thought it was reasonably safe. My wife is like, no, we'll wait till we're sure it's safe. And I respect her judgment in that. She's probably the saner of the two of us. But everybody, and I see that, you look in all the forums, and there are people that get on the ship today, but I would say they're outnumbered 5-1 by people that say no. They're talking about, you see, winter of this year, next year, 2022. I see a lot of people saying it's when they would consider going back on cruise, which brings me back to, please put your answer to that question in the comments on YouTube. And then also, do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. I try to make these shows interesting. I try to do some digging and some research, find things that not everybody knows. I hope you enjoy them. We'll see you next week.